Hello everybody and welcome back to what is effectively day 2 of this 300 TDI engine build. In today's episode I'm fitting the timing gear, which is the cam belt. And you can just see these two pulleys behind me. I've just fitted those prior to doing this video. Today I'm going to fit the timing belt and the front timing cover, amongst some other things, and you'll have to forgive the cold air breath that you can see. It's absolutely freezing in here today, even with the heater that's been on for 2 or 3 hours. I'm going to fit this with the view of trying to fit it to the vehicle a little later on today. I'd really like to try and break the back of this project, get the engine fitted, gearbox and transfer box, so that we can start thinking about bodywork. This vehicle I'd like to get to the stage where it has a bulkhead fitted, so that we can assemble the dashboard and all the necessary equipment to make the engine run. And then I'd quite like to do some content like you may have seen a snippet of on our Instagram, where we drive the vehicle without anything else but that fitted, so that you can see all the mechanical components working, all the parts turning and kind of everything in its rawest form, because I just think it's a piece of art really when you can see all the mechanics of something actually operating. So here you can see I've got everything loosely in place. The pulleys are still loose, like the tensioners are, etc. I'm going to chuck this belt on and try my best to show you the 300 TDI timing procedure. The cylinder head at the moment still isn't bolted down. And as I mentioned in a previous video, this is the bracket. This is the one that I have forgotten many times over my career to fit before torquing down the head. So very important on a 300 TDI Defender, and only a Defender because the Discovery doesn't have these, to fit that bracket before you tighten any bolts up. And they're just not nipped, but they're just sort of torqued to the surface of the head. And I'll go through the torque procedure of that shortly. So I'm going to throw a belt on this, let you guys watch, and as you can see we now have some engine mounts. So the engine mounts are all fitted. I've got a flywheel and stuff that I need to fit, and then once the flywheel's on we can start thinking about throwing this thing together. So as mentioned in previous videos, very important to use high quality parts. I've been thinking a little bit about doing some content on debunking some of the myths on Britpart supplied parts, because actually this came from Britpart. You can buy varying qualities of part from one supplier, would you believe it? So the kind of the thought that Britpart is lower quality can be debunked slightly. So I'm going to throw this on. So 300 TDI timing marks, very simple engines time up. So looking at the vehicle, this is the cam pulley, this is the fuel injection pump, and the crank. They're the only 3 parts that need to be timed. So on the bottom, if you can just see inside there, there is a little arrow on the rear timing cover, which is meant to line up with the Woodruff key on the crank. That in turn lines up with the slot, which is inside the pulley. And a timing belt kit will always come with 2 new pulleys, a new crank pulley, a belt, and this tensioner piece, which is actually part of this pulley here. On the top timing marks, you've got little notches cut out of the gear there, and that notch has to line up with that nib. And then on the top, you have a hole, which you can just see is off at the moment, and I'll show you the timing tool. You can use a drill bit, but there are specific, very cheap timing tools for this job. This needs to rotate a little bit further round. This pulley is floating because the pulley position itself doesn't really matter in terms of the timing. So we'll use a socket to turn this pulley to put the timing tool in, and then this takes up any slack in the belt when you're using the tensioner. So as you tension the belt up, it might be that this requires a little bit of moving, a tooth or so, and it does all that when you're tensioning the belt, so that it actually allows the belt to be taut exactly where it needs to be. I figured I'd just show you that before I carry on. Right, back to the belt. And of course I forgot to put the timing tool in, so I'll take the belt back off and I'll do that again. Don't worry guys, I would have figured that out. Isn't it funny that on a timing instructional video, you forget to time the engine? Don't worry, we'll come back. Well, I'm back and I've got the timing tool. Ow! That's a 300 TDI timing kit, and there's a few things in here you're not going to use. Like this piece, for instance, is designed so that you can isolate the timing gear and change the injection pump whilst the timing is still intact. So we're not going to use that today. The tool we're going to use is this top pin. That's for the injection pump. And then if we had a flywheel fitted, which we don't, I would use a lockout tool for the flywheel, which is a pin that screws into the bell housing, and then this pin pushes up into a little notch that's cut out of the flywheel. But again, we're not going to use that. So I've gone round the other way and obviously timed it up at the crank, because we have access to the crank and can see that timing mark and the arrow. So we'll have another go. You think I would have prepped the tools for this? Maybe I'm going to do that and then come back. In my spare time, I'm a magician. Somehow I make tools completely disappear. It's crazy. I had the tool out to do the timing pulley a minute ago. Who knows where it's gone? So now the timing pin is fitted, and this pulley, as you can see, still moves. Now we'll have a second attempt at fitting this belt. Just watch out, because some belts are directional. This belt doesn't appear to have a direction, and it would just be marked with an arrow in the rotation that the engine follows. So all I'm doing is pushing the belt home on the bottom pulley. The reason for doing that, and you probably can't see it on the video, but if you don't push it round properly, you're going to end up a tooth or so out when it comes to the cam pulley. And this belt should not really be massively tight. Some of the cheaper belts that I've fitted before are a real pain in the neck to actually get round these pulleys. And then all you do is take a little bit more tension up on each of these bolts. And you mustn't rely on any of the timing pins to hold the engine while you tighten stuff up. That's a really bad practice. So I'm going to go and get a 1/2 inch ratchet with a extension to tighten this up. And I'll do this by feel. You know, after nearly 20 years in this trade, you get a pretty good feel for how things are meant to be. So, and this is probably about number 300 or 400 of these engines that I've timed up over the years. And again, I'm not prepared with the tools, so I'm going to go and get the right tool. So I'm back with the tools. What you don't know is I've been gone nearly an hour. I got distracted by one of the other guys that needed help, so went and did that, and then my wife and baby turned up and brought me some breakfast. So assuming I don't still have it on my face. Oh, ow. So I spoke earlier about that tensioner and how that fits in behind, and as you pull this taut, obviously I'm doing this on feel, so you'll have to bear with. As you pull that tight, you want to be just nipping that up. And then we'll nip the idler, which is the other pulley. You have to bear with how slow I'm getting up. I've got a really sore knee. So from memory, that is a 15mm. I don't know what that is in Imperial for any Americans or anybody else. And these two do actually have a specific torque setting. So I'm going to get the book out, check the torque setting, torque up all of these bolts at the same time. Now that that's tight, I can check the tension, which I'm happy with. Yeah, I think that's all okay. So I'm going to torque these up, or at least find the torque setting for them and get on with that. Back to handheld as the gimbal's gone dead. So these are really great things to own. This is a Haynes service repair manual. This is a little bit more vague than a specific 300 TDI one, but it does include most of the information needed to get through on torque settings. So this covers everything from 10J, 19J, 200, 300 TDI and so on up to 1995. It's got a full list of torque settings for almost everything. And the bits that I was looking for are on the 300 TDI engine, timing belt idler pulley nut, or timing belt tensioner bolt, and then this is the outer casing. So 45 Newton meters is what I'm looking for. It actually tells you as well in pounds feet, I should probably mention. So 33 pounds feet. And I'm afraid you're just going to have to trust me on this one because I can't hold the camera and torque it up. So torque wrench, I'm going to do that now. And I also have the torque setting for the bolts and the nut and things like that. I have to obviously torque that nut as somebody took it off, which is a really silly thing to do. Right, we're back and another hour has passed because I had to put the gimbal on charge. So we left off that the timing was now done, and I'll try and bend down here. The timing is done, that's all torqued up and finished. Moving on to the head bolts before I turn the engine over. After you've done the timing, you're meant to turn it over 2 times. This is a bit backwards. This is not normally the way that you would do this. You would torque the head down and, you know, whatever, but it doesn't make any difference because I haven't turned the engine over, so there's been no compression in there. In the head gasket sets comes a diagram for the torque sequence, so that's in which order you're meant to torque the bolts, and 2 sets of readings. Because a 300 and 200 TDI share the same head gasket, it comes with a 200 TDI torque setting and a 300, and the 300 TDI just has an additional 20 Newton meters, 20 degrees on the M12 bolts. So I won't go too much into that, but I described earlier on in the video that there are a couple of different versions of the bolt in length and diameter. So I'm just going to work through the torque sequence now, and it is a combination of torques and degrees. So you're either going to have to get yourself a torque wrench that measures degrees, which is what I have, or the dial that you fit in between the torque wrench or bar, and I'll try and include the name for it. It's not there. I haven't used one in probably 5 years since owning a digital torque wrench, which was a fantastic investment because it makes it so much quicker. So the first setting is, secondly, all these torque settings are in the Haynes manual as well, except it doesn't give you the bolt pattern, the sequence for tightening, which is pretty much the same for every car. So if you've got any mechanical knowledge, it's starting at the middle and working your way out in a clockwise or anti-clockwise fashion. So I'll get this set up and then I think we'll go with a time lapse. Hi John. Yeah, sorry John, 2 secs. I'm just finishing this up and I've got a video going, so if you can hang on a sec. So now the head bolts are done up, I can turn the engine over because now any compression stroke isn't going to affect the gasket at all. So that's one revolution of the crank, and what I'm trying to do is turn it over twice. So 2 revolutions of the crank and then line it back up with its timing marks. And just double check all the marks again. So checking the crank itself, the little nib, and then this in theory, which is in the time tool because I actually did put it away, should slot back in the hole. Yeah, so I'm happy that that's pretty bang on there. Torque setting 25 Newton meters, because this is only a very small torque setting. I'm going to leave the timing pin in. So now in theory everything is bang on, and I'll put a translation up on the screen in case that's a UK thing. I'm just going to go again, 2 more revolutions. 2 revolutions and all the timing marks line up. So I'm happy to put the front cover on now. I'm going to replace the seal in the front timing cover and then that timing job done. So I need a front timing cover and timing cover gasket, and the bolts would be good. I have these organisers, you've probably seen a photo of these, but inside here are all the zinc passivate bolts, all the beautiful gold ones. And it is a bit of a puzzle trying to work out what goes where on the bolts because they're all very different lengths. That was what I was doing, was taking that out. I still haven't found that 1/2-inch gun yet. And I'm going to have to find it because that bolt needs to come out. Maybe I'm not a magician, maybe I'm just blind, but the whole time it's been here with the socket on it that I needed earlier. The other crucial point is that I keep going that way, which is where my toolbox is. My toolbox for 10 years. And I keep completely forgetting that I actually set this up in here to be a little more user-friendly with a toolbox in it. So literally no need at all to go through there. I just need to actually pay attention, which would be good. And I used an old bolt to actually start this job, but I have a zinc plated one, which is cool looking. Sometimes, just to help yourself, if you're getting stuck with this, you can put a little bit of silicone on there just to hold the gasket in place. Now comes the task of figuring out what bolts go where. I'm just going to put a couple in to hold it. And then I'm going to go back to Loctiting bolts before they go in. Christ, my hands are so cold that they don't work properly. We are on a new bottle of unicorn blood. This stuff, I think we worked out before, was more expensive than gold based on the grams. It's just a liquid Loctite that you put on the threads. Thread lock, I've heard it called a number of different things. And here's an interesting fact. As I bought these before, don't buy these from anywhere. They are the top clamps that go on the top couple of bolts that hold the coolant pipe that runs across the front. I ordered a couple thinking a tiny little clip like that isn't going to be much money, right? £62 each plus the VAT for those clips. So don't lose them. Paint them, zinc coat them, whatever you need to do. Just don't buy them. For 140 odd pounds or whatever it would have been, it just isn't worth it. So top tip there. Right, back to the job. See, I'm getting distracted by my own work now. So now I've figured out the sequence of all the bolts. I can just start tightening them. They've all been pre-Loctited. I'm just going to nip them up, and nipping them up quite simply means getting the bolt head flush with the surface of the cover. And don't forget to put your 2 clips on the top that hold the coolant pipe. And I'm not using this to tighten the bolts at all. I'm just running the thread up until I'm happy that all of it's flush. Now I'll check the torque setting in the Haynes manual and torque them all up. Timing belt cover bolts, 25 Newton meters. There's normally a bit of a trend with anything that's M8, tends to be 25 Newton meters. And these can be a bit of a pain in the neck because the little bracket spins as you tighten the bolt. And that's it, timing cover on and all the torque settings done. Torque settings, all the bolts are torqued. I'm going to move on to fitting the rocker shaft now, which is in the top of the head, and that's just the bit that controls all the valves. It's controlled by push rod, which is quite an old-fashioned method of timing. A lot of American engines are still push rod, and that means that the cam sits a little further down in the block and spins with lobes that push rods up and down into a rocker shaft, which open and close the valves. Right, Kev? Don't know if anybody's seen that sketch. I've now got to head out because I've realised I'm missing the valve stem caps, little metal caps that go on. So I'll go and fetch those and I'll show you exactly what it was that was missing. We've all got those mates, haven't we, that just have boxes full of junk that, let's be honest, you're never going to use. This is the messiest guy in the world. But the one thing I need, he always has. It's amazing. It's the sort of thing, can you even buy these?
Yeah.
You can?
Yeah, you can buy them.
One. That's a different size.
6.
And that one.
You can lay them all out and tell what you want.
The amount of stuff we've taken out of this workshop.
And it still looks like a shit.
And it still looks like this. This is why my workshop started to look messy, I reckon, Ian. Everything's got a use. The other day we were only looking for one of those.
Wait there. Can you buy new ones?
Can you buy new? Good man.
Bag of 8.
Brand new. Good stuff. See, it's always worth coming down to see Ian. So we're going to fit the valve stem caps just on top of the valves there. And then a little bit more super slick, ultra slick, which when it's cold is like treacle. And just put it on anything that has a friction. So I've put it in the cups of the push rods as well. I'm just going to clean up the camshaft or the rocker shaft and then fit that. All I'm doing is lining up the push rods with the balls on the end of the rocker shaft so that they're actually pushed home. A little bit fiddly this stage. Once you've got the shaft lined up, it more or less just falls into place. Just straighten up these two caps. And this is not an official hammer, but in this trade everything can be a hammer. So I'll get the nuts and the bolts put on there. This is one time that the sandwich bag technique has worked. And this is what I meant when I said about the sandwich bag. You put the bolts in there and the nuts and you label what it is. And then in true mechanic fashion you rip it open and fit those. So on these there are 2 bolts. Would you believe it? After all of that, the valve stem caps are in there. How funny. See, I didn't even have faith in my own system. Work that out. And the rocker shaft is tightened from the middle outwards, as they do have a tendency to bow, and there will be torque settings for that as well. So all I'll do is I'll initially nip it down so that the rocker shaft is flat. You just have to be careful when you're making this flat and make sure that your push rods are lined up still with the balls, because if you over tighten this and something isn't where it's meant to be, isn't seated correctly, you're going to have a problem. Now what will happen when you tighten this down is it will open a couple of the valves dependent on the position of the engine. So it could be that it opens up 2 or maybe 4. Just as I mentioned that, one of these push rods is not lining up quite where I want it to. There we go. That's why it's important to just go nice and slow with this. Just until it's close to where it wants to be. And all I'm looking for at this stage is for all of these caps to be seated flush on the cylinder head. It's quite easy to snap a rocker shaft, so you have to be quite careful. Once I'm happy that they're flush, then I'll get the torque settings up. Now, this will need valve clearances doing, and I'm going to include that in a later video. As we've put new caps on, we just want to make sure that the valve clearances are still correct. Okay, I'm going to get a torque setting and get that torqued up. So that's a bit of a strange torque procedure. That's 5 Newton meters followed by 50 degrees. Bit of a strange one. Don't know really why Land Rover do things like this, but they've obviously tested this engine to death and it's incredibly reliable, so we'll go with whatever they say. Right then, that is as far as I'm going to go with this video in the engine build series. This is the 300 TDI, now at a point that I can fit it into the chassis, and tomorrow I'm going to start the next episode of this build series, which is fitting up the engine and gearbox and transfer box to the chassis itself, and then we're going to start on all the good looking stuff, which is the bulkhead and the body and the wiring and all the things that make it a car. So I hope you've enjoyed this content. If you did enjoy this content, please give us a like and a subscribe, as it goes a long way to supporting this channel. And if you really enjoyed the Defender content that we produce, stay tuned, because we've got some really interesting stuff coming up in the next few weeks, including a big adventure series. So keep your eyes peeled, guys. Thank you for watching.